Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining Education USA Ukraine on our YouTube channel. I know it's been a while since we met last time, and I hope you all had a great holiday season, and we are thrilled to be back and to meet with you again. And I'm also happy to introduce our first speaker this year, Amir Sadafi, Senior Assistant Director of University of Colorado Boulder. He's also an international graduate recruiter, and Amir has a great extensive knowledge of the admission process for the graduate schools, and he kindly agreed to share his knowledge and share his expertise with you today. Amir, you're welcome, and we're happy to have you today, and the floor is yours. And
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you, Katerina, for that warm welcome. And thank you for Education USA Ukraine for hosting this event and providing me the opportunity to speak about how to best prepare yourself for graduate school and graduate school applications. And in particular, today we wanted to talk specifically on the topic of requesting letters of recommendation from professors and faculty members. But before you get to the point in which you are ready to request letters of recommendation from your professors, it's very important that you are preparing adequately for the application. Katya, you can go ahead to the next slide. And why I say that preparing for the application is so important is because it will really help you in your outreach to your faculty, to professors, and to your letters of recommendation writers, so that you can really focus what the letter of recommendation is writing content is, and also you can help guide your choices in identifying who to ask, who's the right people to ask for those letters of recommendation. So these are a couple of key steps that I think are really important to establish before going through the process of actually reaching out to potential letter writers. And the first and foremost, most important, and the one that really you're going to need to be able to articulate and communicate clearly, not only to the universities to which you are applying, but also to your professors or perhaps former bosses or employers regarding your academic and career goals. So you want to be able to really identify the right program for you. So for example, if you know you want, you have an interest in computer science, do you want to just work in the field of computer science? Do you want to become a researcher in computer science? If you do, then maybe you need to start looking at programs that are research focused, that will have laboratory components, and also programs that are designed that can lead you from a master's into a PhD program. But if you know you're not interested in doing research, maybe you just want to get professional skills and you really want to do a master's program that will prepare you for the industry, and you want to work right after doing your program, well, that will guide you towards a different type of a program as well. That would be more of a professional master's in computer science where you're not having as much of a research component. And that will then help you identify potential research matches at the universities to which you're applying for, and help you also identify what are the required materials, what are the required documents, and what is the profile of the student that this specific program is looking to recruit. We can go to the next slide, Katya. And so where this fits into the process is that when applying to graduate schools, especially in the US education system, I think one thing that is really, you cannot stress enough, especially with some of our international students that maybe are coming from educational systems in which you can apply in a much shorter time frame to graduate programs. This process for applying to graduate school is much longer in the US. You want to really start the process, around about a year before you start your program and more. And that's really kind of on the shorter end of the scale, because you really, in large part, want to give plenty of time to not only preparing and all the steps that we discussed in preparing yourself and doing a lot of the background research and identifying what the best programs are for you, but you want to provide your letters of recommendation writer, your reference contacts, plenty of time to be able to write you letters of recommendation, because you don't want to miss deadlines. Deadlines are very important, especially if you're looking to apply to programs that come with full funding. If you're applying to direct entry PhD programs or fully funded PhD programs, they're going to be very reliant on deadlines to help them identify the cohorts to which to evaluate who they can give funding out to. So that's why you want to make sure that your application is not held up because one of your professors that you requested a letter of recommendation from didn't have enough time to provide that letter for you. We can go to the next slide now. Now, every program that, as I mentioned, that you're applying to, these graduate programs, especially in the United States, graduate admissions is very decentralized. And what I mean by that is that most universities, they don't have so much a central graduate admissions office as much as you're applying to individual departments at the graduate level. And so why that's important is because each individual department is going to be setting their own admissions requirements and their own checklist of items that they're requiring. So that will vary from program to program, and sometimes within the same department, different programs will have different checklists for what they require. And so in terms of application checklists, almost all programs are going to require some combination of what you see here on the screen, which is an online application, an application fee that you send transcripts from what you've studied so far. If there are any required exams like TOEFL or IELTS or GRE, that you send those scores, that you upload and provide a CV or resume. In most cases, that's optional, but highly recommended. A personal statement. And then also letters of recommendation, the numbers of which is really going to depend on the program. The standard in the US is around 3. At our university, we have some departments that only require 2 and some that are asking for 4 letters of recommendation. So it's very important to check with your department and the individual program to see what those requirements are, as well as to see if there are any supplemental materials that are required. And we can move on to the next slide. And then test scores, I won't spend a bunch of time here. I'm sure you'll have other sessions dedicated to exams. Just a couple notes that this year, and because of the COVID pandemic this past year, many departments are not requiring some exams such as GRE. That's the case for many of our departments at the graduate level. And then there's a lot of flexibility for other exams like IELTS and TOEFL. So we are accepting the Duolingo exam, which you can take at home. But those are things that you're going to want to prepare as well, well in advance of applying to the program. We can move to the next slide, Tata. And then deadlines, as I mentioned, I won't stay here. We can move to the next slide. They're very important. They vary from program to program. So before we start writing our or asking for letters of recommendation, I think it's very important to spend some time preparing your personal statement or statement of purpose to the programs that you're applying for, because this can help you, this will kind of force you to go through the process of really articulating and drawing out, sussing out what your intended goal is for graduate school, and really how you're a best fit for that program. Many programs are going to ask for either a personal statement or a statement of purpose. Many departments in the US use these interchangeably. If some programs are asking for 2, how we kind of break those down, the difference between the 2 really is minimal, but one is kind of more what you want to do versus who you are as a person and as a student. But really what's important here is that the personal statement or statement of purpose is really highlighting your motivations, your goals and interests for applying to a specific program and why you're a good fit for that program. And going through the process of preparing this, we can go to the next slide, Kata. Here, as I mentioned, yes, the differences between a personal statement and a statement of purpose. Ultimately, though, they're both sharing the same goal, which is convincing that admissions committee at that department to which you're applying as to why you are a good fit and why you'll be successful in that program. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So the recommendation letter. So today there's three main points that I think are important that we hit today on the recommendation letter. First is just who to ask. We know we want to ask people who are familiar with your academic work and performance. But again, speaking back to, you really want to ask people who can speak to why you're a good fit to the graduate program to which you're applying. I also want to talk on how to ask, what are some best practices when it comes to asking for letters of recommendation from your professors and faculty, and also what is some key information you should be providing to your professors when asking for these letters of recommendation. We can go ahead and move to the next slide there. Now, who to ask. So this is very important. We know that who to ask, as I mentioned, should really be informed by having gone through the process of identifying the program and the best fit program for you, and also articulating what your personal academic and career goals are. And once you've done that, now who you ask can really, this question really can depending on, like, if you're currently enrolled in college, that's a very easy answer because then you have many professors that you can reach out to, and it makes most sense for most, if not all of your letters of recommendation to come directly from your professors. And ideally, you want to be asking professors who are working in or have experience in a field related to your intended graduate program. So that, if you're looking to apply for a master's in engineering, then maybe having your art history, professor that you work with for an elective write a letter for you might not be the best option, even if they know you really, really well. However, that being said, most programs do allow for you to submit multiple letters of recommendation. And in that case, if you already have other letters of recommendation coming from faculty members that can speak to your strengths for, in this case, in engineering or math and science fields, then it wouldn't be a problem to have that third letter come from a professor who's not in a related field, but has worked very closely with you and can speak to other qualities that you bring to the table, but ultimately be able to speak to your strength as a student. And so really the goal would be to have professors whose focus is aligned to some degree with your intended field. This is for a couple of reasons. One, because the admissions committees obviously are most interested in how successful you will be in that specific sub-discipline. But second is that your department that you're applying to may be familiar with some of your professors. And if you are getting professors to write letters of recommendation from you that are coming from the field to which you're applying for your graduate program, they will be much more familiar with the depth and breadth of the work that your professor who's writing that letter of recommendation from, they'll be much more familiar with their work and generally be more interested in what those faculty members have to say. So that's why we make those distinctions there. However, let's say you've already graduated school, you've been working for several years, maybe you're not in the best contact with your former faculty, maybe your school has shut down. There could be a variety of reasons why professors might not be the easiest or best immediate choice for you. And in those cases, you can reach out to bosses, maybe mentors in different fields. If you're working at nonprofits, they could potentially also be other colleagues in the different field, but really people that can speak to your work ethic, your drive, and other skills and qualities that you can bring to the table, and as well as why. In these scenarios, if you're applying to these programs, especially professional programs, they're going to care less about the academic rigor and as much as kind of all of the other characteristics that you bring to the table and these other qualities, and a lot of these other qualities that you do demonstrate in a professional setting. And that's why bosses and mentors could be excellent people to reach out to for that, because they've worked with you in real world examples or cases, so they can really speak closely to some of the qualities that perhaps a professor that you didn't have so much constant close contact with couldn't speak to. However, if you are, still, even if you graduated college many years ago, if you do have or continue to maintain good relationships with former professors, it absolutely does not hurt to reach out to them and ask them for letters of recommendation as well. We can continue to the next slide, Katya. Now, how to ask. So you've decided, what are the best programs for you, which schools are going to be the best fit, which professors you're going to reach out to for writing these letters of recommendation for you. Now, one of the really important things is like how you go about asking them. And first and foremost, and most importantly, and cannot be highlighted or repeated enough, is just making sure that you provide plenty of time to your professors and recommenders for writing your recommendation letters, because you really want to be respectful of the fact that they have other obligations and duties, and you want to give them plenty of time so that they're writing, a really good letter for you and not feeling rushed to write something very generic and just, sign their name on the bottom. So in general, the rule of the earlier the better will always hold true when it comes to letters of recommendation. And you always want to be very courteous, communicating, you're acknowledging that you recognize that this is taking time out of their traditional, daily responsibilities and duties, and thanking them for their consideration of you and of their time. And that can go a long way to kind of, even if they've already established a kind of a good impression of you, it goes a long way to reminding them that of that good impression. And I always highly encourage students that in their first ask, they try to arrange a meeting, ideally, during these pandemic times, of a virtual meeting with your letter writer. And that allows you to speak to them in kind of more personal format and perhaps greater length, and answer kind of, in real time any questions they have about you and about your plans. But really you want to set that meeting as a means to speak to them about your plans for going to graduate school. And that can help them guide how they're writing their recommendation letter and what they're including in it in particular. And even if you're unable to or uncomfortable with securing like a video chat with a professor in order to ask for a letter of recommendation, you can still do so via email. It's just very important that you do so formally, very courteously, and that you provide all of the key information that they need in order to compose that letter of recommendation for you effectively and most beneficially for you. We can go ahead and go to the next slide.
If I may have a second, I just forgot to mention at the very beginning that we will have a Q&A time at the end of the presentation, so feel free to leave your questions if you have any at the chat box, and Amir will kind of answer your questions at the end.
Yes, please ask me any and all questions you may have regarding this presentation or general graduate school questions. I'd be more than happy to answer. Now, when reaching out to and providing information, so when you're reaching out, you're writing a formal request to your professor, asking them kindly and politely to write you a letter of recommendation, it can be very helpful to provide them with a couple of key items when sending that request. First and foremost, I would say is like a summary document. And this is where that personal statement or statement of purpose that you've already gone through the exercise of working on writing can be very, very helpful, because this is where you're taking all of that and kind of condensing it into a couple paragraphs about your goals for going to graduate school and what you maybe hope to do with your degree after you complete your degree. And also where you can talk about that best fit program. Why are you applying to this specific university and this specific program? And that's where you can talk about different research you want to be involved in. Maybe a certain university has access to certain equipment that you want to be able to work on. Maybe there's specific faculty members or certain research institutes that you want to be involved in at this specific university that you're applying to. These are key things that really can help your letter of recommendation stand out if your recommender is able to incorporate these really kind of best fit type aspects into their letter writing. So providing that to them in a summary document is very, very helpful when they go to actually draft and compose that letter of recommendation. I think it's also helpful to include kind of a list of the graduate programs you're applying to in general. So, and also the due dates, just so that they have easy reference to see when do I need to have this in. And it's good to maybe just clearly articulate there, maybe differentiate the date that you're asking for the professor to submit by. Just make sure that that's very easily, readily accessible for the professor. And if it is indeed a professor and not a boss or a mentor that's writing this letter of recommendation, You might want to include the courses that you've taken with them, any big research projects you've done with them, or papers that you've done in their class, and any grades that you've received on any of those big projects and your final grade in the class. You may, depending on your personal statement that you've prepared, you may want to include that just for their reference, like as an attachment so that they can read through it if they're interested. That can really, really help guide their letter writing. And then I think it's always good to attach your most current resume and CV so they can kind of get a full picture. You know, in most contexts, especially if you're asking a single professor to write a letter of recommendation, they only know you in the context of maybe 1 or 2 courses or in a limited scope of the work that you've done with them. But you really want them to be able to at least, you know, even though they're predominantly speaking to their work with you, that are speaking to the qualities of that they know about you and their capacity that they know you. It's very good for them to have kind of a broad picture of all the different activities you're involved in and any other experience that you're that you have as well. And I think it's good to include a copy of your transcripts or other courses that you've completed and that are very much, again, focus it towards what's related to what's most relevant to the admissions committee of the graduate department to which I'm applying to. And you may or may not want to include your overall GPA. And I think it's very, very important to follow up with your professors with thank you letters when asking them. And I think it's not a bad idea. So like, let's say you send the request to them. I think, you know, sending multiple thank you letters, a maximum 2, but a second one, because sometimes, you know, you've asked them, they've agreed, but you haven't heard back, and you want to check in, but you don't want to pester or bother. I think, you know, waiting a couple weeks out, you know, maybe it's right up to the deadline, and you can send a second thank you letter, but asking them, you know, politely, you know, when you would expect to receive the letter from them. But again, thanking them profusely for their time and their consideration can go a long way. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. And yeah, so that really, I wanted to end there, my presentation portion, so that I was able to really answer any questions. And Katya, I'll leave it up to you if we want to transition into a QA or if we want to spend a couple minutes.
Well, yes, we will. You can speak about the University of Boulder. I think our audience will be interested like, you know, just we want to give couple, like a minute or two to our audience to think about their questions. We do have a question though, but I can go back to the questions after you probably introduce university to our students, and we'll speak a little bit more about the University of Boulder.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'll just briefly give you an overview of the institution that I am representing today. So I work at the University of Colorado, Boulder. Here you can see our campus. All the buildings there with the red roof right in the center under the B Boulder are part of the university campus. We're situated just outside of Denver, about 30 minutes outside of Denver, which is the capital city of Colorado. Boulder is a quintessential college town. The university dominates life there. Almost everyone in the town or in the city is either a student, a faculty member, a professor, a staff member like myself. There's about 150,000 people that live in Boulder, a couple million people that live in Denver. And Boulder is just great because you have these beautiful mountains in the background and really all this access to all kinds of outdoor recreation, but you're not isolated. You're still like 30 minutes outside of this big city of Denver and all the things it has to offer there. We can go to the next slide. Yeah, so by the Shanghai or Academic RRWU ranking, since 2018 and this year as well, we've been ranked number 38 university in the world. And that's in large part because of our research capacity here. We really, really focus on our research. We receive over $500 million a year in research grants and really make that available to our faculty, our students, our research labs. We're a tier 1 research institution. Katya, we could go to the next slide. And we have, you know, the city of Boulder, just a couple of key fun, I think, rankings. We've been ranked number 1 smartest city in the US. That's because by the population, by per capita, we have the highest number of PhD holders per capita of any city in the United States. So it's a highly educated city, very happy city. That happiest city, I think, was a National Geographic ranking, and one of the best places to live. And I think in large part that's because of our location, because you have this constant access to these beautiful mountains, and Colorado is known for having over 300 days of blue skies per year. So even in the winter, it will, after a snow, after 1 hour or so, the clouds will leave and it's just blue sky and nice white snow on the ground. So beautiful place to live. We can move to the next slide. And here's just a map to situate where Boulder and Colorado and Denver is in relation to the rest of the U.S. Denver International Airport is very well connected internationally for being in the middle of the U.S. So you can fly several direct international routes there. Students coming from Ukraine, probably the easiest would be a direct flight through, from Kyiv to a European hub and then direct straight to Denver. We could go to the next slide. And then just a note that you get free buses that gets you from the airport to the campus and free from Boulder to Denver as well. So as I was mentioning, we are a tier 1 research institution. So that's kind of the highest caliber, highest classification of research institutions. And we are very proud of the fact that we have 5 Nobel laureate professors that are currently teaching, supervising PhD students, working with graduate students. 4 of those are in the field of physics and 1 in the field of chemistry. We have several Genius Grant Fellows, and we have hosted several Fulbright Fellows that we host every year and send out several Fulbright Fellows as well. We can go, yes, excellent. And here is just not a comprehensive, but a small smattering of some of our top 20 rankings. As you see, some of our strongest programs are going to be in the mathematics, sciences, natural sciences, earth sciences. We continuously maintain a very high ranking in geosciences, so like geology and related fields of sciences. But we also have, top ranked programs, like we have a number 5 program in ceramics as well. So very comprehensive in our programs, but here's just a small smattering of some of our rankings. We can go to the next slide. And as I mentioned, we have all kinds of programs, research, professional, different types of programs. We have a College of Music with performance-related programs, but really the focus of our university is in the research area. And as you can see there, we're the #1 public university for NASA Research Awards. So our aerospace program, astronomy programs, very, very strong. #1 National Institute of Health funded program as well, as far as non-medical institutions. And we have tons of different research partnerships with different research institutes, lots of national and federal research laboratories that are based in Colorado and in Boulder, like the National Institute of Science and Technology, which is based right outside of the campus that many of our graduate students who are studying in those fields get to intern at as well. And we can go ahead to the next slide. And then funding. Being a research institute, we are able to provide a lot of research funding through research and teaching assistantships. All of our PhD programs are essentially guaranteed full funding through those assistantships. And many of our master's programs are providing funding, up to full funding in some cases, for their programs through research assistantships, teaching assistantships, and different fellowships, scholarships, and grants as well. And we can go ahead to the next slide. And with that, I think that kind of concludes the presentation. Again, my name is Amir Sadaf. If you have any questions about Boulder, please feel free to reach out to me. And then hopefully, if we have any questions about the presentation today, Katya, we can go ahead and address those now.
Thank you, Amir. Thank you for the great presentation. I think you covered almost everything about the letters of recommendation. We do have couple questions. And the first one is, what if my referee is unable to write the letter in English?
Yes. So as long as you just get a certified translation of that, we would be that would not pose any problem for us. So the same way that you would take your same transcripts and get them translated to English, you would be able to do the same for letters of recommendation as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think it's the second question is related to the previous one. I'm not quite sure how to prepare the transcripts for the submission. Would an unofficial translation of the transcripts be enough to have a fair chance to be admitted?
Yes. So the answer to that question will vary from university to university and program to program. Our university at the application stage only requires unofficial. So we don't require official copies or official translations. We just need to have, the scanned unofficial copy and then a translation as well. It doesn't need to be official at the application stage. Now, if we grant you admission to the program, you will need to eventually provide us with the official copies of that before you join us here on campus. But for the admissions purpose, we just accept unofficial. But make sure to check with the specific program or department to which you're applying to see. And most will have pretty clear instructions for international students. But if not, you can reach out to individuals like myself on the administrative side to ask them what their university is requiring. But in our case, just unofficial would work.
Well, we have another question about GPA score. Probably you'll be like, kind to answer. Could you advise on GPA calculation, specifically on translating the score to from a grading system which is not a direct match to the U.S. grading system?
Yes.
How university deals with this?
Excellent question. So again, this will vary from university to university. Each university will be different, but I can speak in the case of our university, we have an entire team of international credential evaluators, and their role is to take your transcripts and the translations and convert your grades to a US style GPA with knowledge of the local context. So if you're a Ukrainian student, they will pull up kind of the Ukrainian grading scale and our kind of official versions, and our international credential evaluators are all individuals who've been with the university 10, 20 plus years and have been working with these institutions for a long time. So in most cases, when you're applying, they're well aware, and they will of, like the grading system. And sometimes, I have students that will apply from that systems that use kind of more of the French scale where 20 is the maximum, but nobody ever gets 20. And so they say, well, is this fair with, applying with, US students who many students can get 4.0 and everyone can get all A's. And in my context, we don't grade like that and nobody gets all A's. Well, our international credential evaluators forward these notes on to the department. So they forward your GPA conversion. They let them know anything unique about your specific institution as well, because a lot of times students ask me, well, I studied at a school in my home country that, I don't have a very high GPA, but I went to the most competitive and most difficult university in my country. And what I respond is that we are always forwarding those notes about that, like the quality of your institution onto the faculty for them, so they have that available when they're reviewing your application. So they know that a GPA from your very kind of competitive, prestigious institution is not the same as, someone getting a much higher GPA from an open enroll, university or for-profit institution in your country. And those different aspects, we all do that internally as a university when you send us your transcripts. Other universities may ask you that you have a third party do these evaluations for you. So like WES is a very common one. And those are kind of third parties that you have to pay a fee to go and do the official English translation and also the grade and GPA calculations with any notes as well. But we do that for all of our international students for free when you send in your application.
Thank you, Admir. And also, I want to mention that you can always reach out to Education USA Ukraine if you have any questions about your GPA, and we will always help you to calculate and to, with all your questions about GPA. Feel free to reach out to us. Another question is, how are letters of recommendation uploaded? A lot of our professors are extremely bad with computers, which is true.
Yes. Yeah, great question. So again, it's going to depend on the online application platform of the university that you're applying to. So in our case, we try to make this easier for students and their professors. And what we ask is that when you apply to, or when you start your application, to the University of Colorado Boulder. The reason I always encourage students to start that online application portion earlier is because many, if not most, universities will have a similar feature to ours, in that when you go in to start your application, you'll fill in general biographical information, your name, full name, date of birth, those types of things. But then I'll have a section, well before you are at any point to submit the application, where you enter in the name of your recommender writers, so professors, for example, and their email addresses, and it will send them what is a very kind of simple form where it asks them maybe in, I would say, maximum of 6 to 10 different areas, like work ethic, quality of work, what type of student you were, participation. It will ask them on a scale of 1 to 10 to kind of evaluate you. And then it will provide them with a box where they can upload any letter that they want to write. If they've already written a letter, they can copy and paste it and put it there, and upload it directly that way. And I think that makes it easier for the professors because, they'll have an email from the university. Once they complete it, it shoots an email right back to us, and then we notify you that we've received the recommendation letter from this professor, and we're only missing these professors' names. And that way, also, when you log into your application portal, you can check in real time which professors have submitted or not. Now, granted, you might have some professors that even that might be too much for them. In that case, they might prefer to actually write out a letter for you, and we can accept those in a variety of electronic formats as well. The best way, and most universities will require the professor themselves to email the letter if they can directly from their university email account to a specific email that we provide to you. And you would just email anyone in our international graduate admissions team, and we would be able to upload that to your application that way. And similarly, if they're someone who's not very technologically advanced and cannot write in English, that's also fine. You can get them to write in your native language or the language of instruction in the country in which you're studying, and then just have that translated for us, and then upload those PDFs to your application.
Thank you so much. And the next question is, I think, about the letter case. Is there any possibility that the university would reach back to the professor or send them any type of confirmation email? Yeah. Because some of them, if they don't speak English, they just can be confused and just delete the message. So
yeah. Yeah. So in any case like that, I've worked with students where that's happened before, where the university sends your professor the email link for filling out the evaluation for you. Just reach out to people like myself, or if you look, on the international admissions website, they will have contacts. You can reach out to people like myself, or sometimes if you look at the on your university websites under the frequently asked questions or help or assistance section, they will list out clearly, if you are having this problem, email this email ID or email address, and they will assist you. And it's pretty simple on the back end for most universities to resend that out to your professors. But again, these are all reasons why, and I think perfect examples why starting this process and asking earlier is better, because you don't want to be right up to a deadline and then you realize that, oh, my professor doesn't know how to submit this, and I need to do these secondary measures to get this letter of recommendation in on time.
Wonderful. Does letter of recommendation require any notarized verification or stamp or signature?
That is going to be specific to the university and program. Some are going to ask for these to be, very formally, sealed. We're a little bit more flexible with our international students because we realize all of these other factors. But that's why in those cases where we don't have it, like a stamped or sealed version, that's why we are asking for the full email contact and name for the professor or whoever is writing your recommendation letter, so that we have recourse to reach out to them to verify authenticity.
Thank you so much for your answers. Well, I just have a question of my own.
Sure.
Does the title of professor matter, for the recommendation?
Excellent question, Katya. So I think in general, no, But I think that is a kind of specific to the type of program. I think this is where, again, going back to best fit type programs and identifying that when asking your recommenders is very important. Because if you're applying to, depending on the program, if you're applying to a very competitive program at a highly selective university in which you are going to be doing novel research in a very specific subdiscipline, and you've done your bachelor degree in that field, then and you've studied with full professors who've been your supervisors, then in those cases, like I would be lying to say if it doesn't matter at all, because I think that those faculty members, those professors are going to look at who you've worked with and how closely you've worked with. But that's like the small, I think, exception to the case, in that it doesn't matter in almost most cases. What matters more is how closely they worked with you. So even if they're not a full professor, if they're adjunct faculty, if they're teaching staff, if they've worked closely with you, supervised you, seen your work, can comment again on those key factors. How well can they speak to you being a good fit for the program, and how well can they comment on your work ethic, your general academic preparedness, and your overall qualities to being a good student. Now, that is more important than someone having the title of professor. So, and I think that that's important to know, because a lot of international students will want to go to the most senior professor, the chair of the department, the highest person that doesn't know them at all, that's never worked with them. And they think that a letter of recommendation from that person, because their title is so much higher, is going to be better than maybe just the adjunct or part-time faculty that was teaching them, but they were working with very closely. And in most cases, it's going to be the person that doesn't have the title but knows you better that's going to be a better person to write a letter of recommendation.
Thank you so much. Another question just came. Should that be my teacher, or that can be also my coach?
Or like a sports coach is the question? Like, can a sports coach write a letter of recommendation?
Well, I mean, I would add to the question, if, for example, for some of the students or young adults who want to apply to the graduate program, maybe they just graduated university long ago, as you mentioned during your presentation, and maybe they just lost contact with the professors they worked with, and they only have the employers or probably the managers or the leaders they can ask the recommendation letters from. So would it be an issue? Would the provost still want to have a recommendation letter from a teacher or professor?
Yeah, the programs are going to want to have that like a recommendation letter generally from people that's worked directly with the student. So they want people with firsthand knowledge to speak about the student. So it can't just be like regular, employees or teachers that are not full on like no longer with the institution anymore. Is that the question? If they're not like no longer.
Yes. If there is no professors who can provide me with a letter of recommendation, but I have other people who I work with, correct. And yeah.
So I mean, if you've graduated some time ago, it's generally not an issue at all. If you are a recent student, then and you're not getting any of your professors to write letters of recommendation, while you can secure letters from other places, it's going to raise some red flags. So you want to address it in some other places of either in your personal statement, maybe in some cases, and I've worked with students that, they've, because of, war or other reasons, had to leave their countries or no longer have access to their professors or home institutions. And that's where you want to talk about that. But in general, the graduate program is going to get your application, say, well, you just graduated 1 year ago. Why you couldn't find, a professor to write your letter of recommendation. And maybe there's not a bad reason behind that, but you just want to explain that. You don't want to leave that for the professors to assume, because you can assume they'll assume the worst outcome, that, your professors would have written bad things about you, and that's why you didn't ask them.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the answer. We have 2 more questions. I mean, it's wonderful. If I apply to several U.S. universities, so the professors will have to complete the recommendation forms for all the institutions separately, Or can I just upload the recommendation letter to the portal by myself, not to bother my professor every time?
Yes, great question. So that's why I think it's good to do all that background preparation work before starting to reach out, so that when you do reach out, you can provide your professor with the list of all the universities you're applying to. Now, I think it's best practice would be to kind of ask, yes, you don't want to bother them and keep asking them one-off requests. So it's good to compile that all together and say, I'm applying to these universities, so that at most, when the professor is sitting down, they can draft generally kind of one letter. Maybe it's up to the professor, if they know a certain institution, they might want to tweak a letter or two here or there, but it's the same text and they can just, easily change the name, and they have a clear list of what they would need to do that for. But if you are just getting a more general, that's not specific to the university letter, that's also possible. You can get that type of a letter from your professors that you then use in application packets and upload alongside your applications. That works too. In general, those types of letters, I would say, just want to make sure that they're really strong letters if you're going to use them widely, so that, because in general, the ones that are specific to a university are just read stronger. They just come across stronger than a general one, but it's not a problem.
Oh, thank you. Well, we have another question, but I think we already answered this. Should all my letters of recommendations be from the professors, or one maybe from the professor and another from my boss colleague? Yes, I think.
Yes. Yeah, it can be a mix. But again, I think how you answer that question will be very much dependent on finding that best fit program. Because like if you're applying to a professional program, MBA or a Master's of Finance or something like that, that's a professional thing, they're not going to care so much that all of your recommendation letters come from professors. They are looking overall at your qualities, right? And what you're going to bring to the table. Whereas if you're applying to a very rigorous, academically challenging, competitive program, they're going to want to see almost all, if not all, professors writing letters of recommendation with supplemental letters coming from outside sources as well.
Well, thank you, Amir, for your time and for the information provided. I'm really sure that our audience found a lot of interesting and useful information today from you, and thank you for sharing your expertise with us. I think this is all for today, and thank you everybody for watching, for listening, and for your questions. Wonderful audience. I love when we have a lot of questions. Thank you everybody, and thank you, Amir. Have a great evening, and see you next week. Everybody, yes, goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.